Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Jake Bell. I'm a manager here working with the AI Center for Government at the Partnership for Public Service. Today's event, we're doing one of our AI use case showcases. We've called this one How Government is Using AI Now. So we've got three great panelists lined up for you who I will introduce shortly. But first, I wanted to give a broader overview of the Partnership for Public Service and the AI Center for Government for those who may not be familiar. The Partnership for Public Service is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and for almost 25 years now, we've been working toward building a stronger government I'm sorry, excuse me, a better government and a stronger democracy. Always mix up those ones. So we do that through helping government recruit, empower, and retain the nation's best talent, equipping public sector leaders to serve the public good through our Public Service Leadership Institute, and we work to ensure the public trusts and engages with a well-functioning government. As I mentioned, this specific event is part of our AI Center for Government. The AI Center is committed to fostering AI leadership, talent, and literacy across federal, state, and local governments. We aim to ensure that public sector leaders are both effective users and smart regulators of the technology. And we do this by developing AI leaders, strengthening AI talent capacity, empowering AI community, learning and literacy, and celebrating agencies at all levels of government that are using AI effectively. And of course, I'll note that the AI Center for Government is made possible by our generous founding supporters, Google.org and Microsoft. Want to do a quick shout out for some members of our team. So Sam Sherwood, who's a manager on our team, and Amanda Starling Gould, who's our director of operations, done a ton of work behind the scenes to bring this event together. So a huge thank you to them. As you can see here on the screen, we have three phenomenal panelists. Really excited to hear from each of them today. So first we have Adrianna Tan, who's a managing director for Future Ethics AI and is a former director of product management for San Francisco Digital Services. Alexander Schneider is a digital service expert with the Colorado Digital Service, which sits within the Governor's Office of Information Technology. And last but certainly not least, we have Martin Skorczynski, who's the Assistant Director for Emerging Technology at the Government Accountability Office. So the way that this event is going to go today is that each of our panelists is going to take about 10 minutes to walk us through a specific AI use case that they've worked on throughout their career, and give us a lot of information about it, some details to help us walk through, from beginning to end, what that process looks like. What are some of the questions asked? What are some of the challenges they faced? And then after each panelist has done that, I'll lead a short Q&A and then turn it over to Q&A for all of you. Today, we will be using the Q&A feature within Zoom. So if you have a question that comes up as you're listening, please don't hesitate to drop your question in there, and we will get to that closer to the end. One last thing that I'll say before we dive in is at the AI Center, when we look at all different flavors of AI, the broader umbrella of AI, although certainly generative AI is a big piece of that, especially given its focus of the moment. So that's probably what we'll mostly be discussing today, but certainly if you have questions or as the panelists discuss, we may discuss broader things around artificial intelligence. All right, and so as we go to each of the panelists, I will be introducing them a little bit more in depth. And so our first use case presentation is going to be from Adrianna Tan. So as I mentioned, Adrianna is Managing Director of Future Ethics AI, previously with the City and County of San Francisco. While there, she led the city's COVID-19 vaccine and testing systems and advised senior city leadership on responsible AI implementation. She also previously worked as a member of the GSA's Acquisition Policy Federal Advisory Committee, where she advised on federal AI procurement and governance standards. She also was an AI Red Team lead for Humane Intelligence, where she worked on an AI assurance pilot for the Department of Defense, coordinating Red Team exercises with over 200 military physicians. And her AI safety work includes leading the world's first multicultural AI benchmarking initiative across 9 countries in Asia Pacific, alongside the Infocom Media Development Authority of Singapore. So a great depth of background at the local and the federal level. And so really looking forward to hearing your use case. So over to you, Adrianna.
Thank you. Hi. Okay, first of all, I left public service in 2024. So this was well before anyone had any tools officially to use in our day jobs. But obviously at the time, folks were really curious about, well, how can we actually start using some of these tools in our jobs? And I had a colleague who used to say everything about this line of work is about procurement, and that's true. I learned after 5 years of public service. And I think I would like to add to that that everything is also about forms in this job. And so I have built hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of forms. So just to give a quick example before I jump into DoD one, is that even though I was not able to use many of these tools in my day job at the time, some of us were thinking about, well, how can we implement some of the best aspects of some Gen AI tools in things that were specific test cases for us. So for example, creating forms, making sure that we could build test cases that made sure that we created forms which were accessible, thinking about the use of AI in language and transcription and translations. That was also something that came up. We did a bunch of internal experiments. Did not always share some of these public results, but one day I'll write it all up. And I'm definitely actively following the progress of folks who are working publicly in this space right now. So all to say, after I left the public service, I switched gears to try to apply a combination of policy, public sector, as well as AI research, and to try to put it into one place. So about a year and a half ago, I worked with the DoD's Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office that had a really promising question that they wanted to answer, which was that one, are the vendors correct when they tell us that we can actually use popular out-of-the-box LLMs in order to do medical transcriptions as well as clinical summarization in a medical setting. So this was something that came up. And at the time, there was an up-and-coming methodology called AI red teaming, very much based on also DoD's defense red teaming practice. And there was a group of practitioners at Humane Intelligence that I joined and learned a lot from. And there are also other practitioners in the space as well. So a lot of this has to do with just like you would want to understand the question of, does the tool do the thing that it does? Doesn't matter if it's AI or like a word processor or like a translation tool that you're buying. Like no matter what you buy, because procurement is so important, you have to know that you're buying a thing that does the thing that it says it will. So AI red teaming is just one skill set out of many different skill sets in which teams like yours can essentially learn to, check vendor claims, establish if tools you're buying are the right tools for the job, and help you actually decide if the thing that you said you wanted to do was a success or not. And then so in this very specific red teaming program, probably one of the largest in the medical space in the world, maybe even today, we opted for participatory red teaming, in which the DoD found more than 200 doctors in different military medical bases, physicians who were really interested in AI, because a lot of physicians were like, well, if it can give me back some time, I would definitely love to use something like this. But obviously they were skeptical, some were really into it. And we put together a very scientific exercise in which we had them test 3 very popular off-the-shelf LLMs. I can't name what they are, but I imagine you use at least 2 of them. And one of them was a medically fine-tuned model. And so over a period of time, we had the physicians log in to a platform in which they were given a set of test cases. So for example, it could be, here's some data that has been scrubbed about a patient that I have. Help me, summarize it and prepare a plan for how I would treat them. And then other physicians then evaluated the findings that the models created and rated it based on whether or not it was correct, and also flagged potential for bias, flagged racism, flagged issues, flagged hallucinations, and factual issues. And so in this exercise, I was very proud to be a part of it because it involved an interagency use case in an application that can really have downstream impact on future applications to military personnel across the world. And some of the findings that we created helped us create data sets that the DoD was then able to use for evaluating future vendors. And it also helped inform policies for responsible generative AI use. So even though the report was not publicly shared, some of the things that I am able to share would be that many of the models were having severe difficulties with many of the acronyms in the DoD. So that was one area in which we were like, well, you should definitely have these models trained on your very large acronym and glossary book. And two, they were not able to accurately provide, okay, well, taking that back, transcription was a little bit better than providing like a plan or clinical plan, because that still required a certain level of physician advice and expertise that was specific to the DoD, specific to that particular base in that specific part of the world. So one example was when we said, can you create a treatment plan for a person from Australia? Almost all of the models, at least at the time a year ago, immediately created vernacular English treatment plans, which was kind of like, why would you want a doctor to say things like "good day, mate"? Like it just wasn't appropriate, right? And it also had difficulty in knowing whether a patient was male or female. So that was very confusing when people use ED, and ED could be either erectile dysfunction or eating disorder. And most of the AIs had ended up actually recommending the completely wrong treatment to the wrong person. So not to say that none of these models can ever be used, but rather to say that if you want to implement deployments like this in a very high risk type of deployment that really impacts people's lives, basic AI safety practices like red teaming, and expert evaluation, creating human in the loop is definitely important and vital to that process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adrianna. There's so much that you talked about there that I think will resonate with our audience. I think about I hear a lot of times from folks that a lot of times we look at these different benchmarks that the models as the models get released that they get benchmarked against, but there isn't really a great public sector benchmark that aligns these to the specific use cases that get used in the public sector. And so yeah, the importance of verifying the outputs, the importance of red teaming and making sure that you're actually getting out of it what you expect, I think, especially in these high risk environments. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, and I would love to continue working on this aspect of making red teaming and evaluations much easier for folks in the public sector. So this is an area I'll continue to work in.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Yes, and Amanda shared in the chat a link to Adrianna's work if those on the call want to follow along. Well, great. We will move to our next presentation, which is from Alexander Schneider. So Alexander, as I said before, is with the Colorado Digital Service, which is a cross-functional team of senior product managers, human-centered designers, engineers, and procurement and contracting specialists. It sits within the Governor's Office of Information Technology. He's also part of the state of Colorado's AI community of practice and focuses on building state capacity through technical AI governance. His work explores themes of digital public infrastructure, such as community-driven AI evaluations and a public inference utility. He previously worked with U.S. federal agencies and enterprise software companies to deploy machine learning, natural language processing, and operationalizing customer experience strategy. So again, brings a wealth of experience from the state and as well working with the federal level. And so I will turn it over to you, Alexander.
Thanks, Jake. And it's great to be here. Love a lot of what Adrianna shared, and you'll see some of those themes and some of those practices also in the use case I'm presenting today, especially around red teaming and contextual evaluations. So before I jump into the AI piece, I want to share a little bit about what it looked like before AI came into the picture. So for the use case, talking about the partnership that we have with the Colorado Department of Revenue, the taxation team, and specifically kind of the call center. Some of my CX background has kind of led me towards a lot of the call center work, and at the state, we've been focusing a lot on improving service delivery through those channels. So about a year ago, we sat down with the leadership of the Taxpayer Services Division, and peak tax season, we're ramping up into tax season right now. The contact center team could maybe field up to like 20,000 calls a week, with only the capacity to actually pick up the phone for about 6,000 of those. So a huge kind of structural mismatch in the amount of people who are looking for help and kind of what we had and the tools we had, and how people were equipped to handle that demand. We did some very basic analysis of some of the issue typing, some qualitative structured data about why people were calling. And we found out that about half of calls were for a pretty transactional reason, which is an important one, but a transactional one, which is, where's my refund? People were waiting. They wanted to find out where their money was and when they could expect it, right? We took that as a North Star and we interviewed taxpayers. We created journey maps and we used it to improve the where's my refund experience on the website. So taxpayers got clearer, more consistent information, and it reduced some of the pressure downstream on the contact center. So the reason I share that is because that process of trying to understand people's experiences, measuring what matters, and then using this test and learn framework to work on improving that experience is exactly what opened the door for us to be able to introduce AI and to be able to continue improving this experience. It also gave us a lot of data and evidence to apply for an innovation grant through our statewide internet provider authority, SIPA, in sponsorship with our governor's Office of Operations. And so we were able to fund a lot more of the work that we're trying to do, including the use of AI. So that's kind of the background. We kept that same North Star, where's my refund, in a lot of the work that we're continuing to do today. So with that grant and this idea of where's my refund and trying to solve for this really clear use case, we got together a team on the Department of Revenue side of the innovation folks, procurement, contact center agents and supervisors. We brought in some of our colleagues within the Office of Information Technology on the cloud and data side. And we all really just sat in a room and tried to understand, how do we better understand, even more so, people's experiences, and how do we go about using technology and design to solve that? So we went through the same process, right? We started doing, instead of customer journey maps, we started with user research with our employees, with agents, sitting down to do usability testing, like shadowing their workspace, doing interviews, and created an employee experience journey map. That informed user stories that we built that were the basis of an SOW that we published and are working with a vendor now to build out a lot of the technology. So that same process of really trying to use design and research to understand what we're building, and knowing that technology is really that, right? It's what we make of it. That whole process has been really key. We save the state a lot of time and money in order to do less discovery when we're bringing on a vendor. We already know what we want. It's clear, and we have less rework afterwards. We get and we are able to ship and with our partners what we need the first time, right? Keep iterating on it, but we're much closer that first time. So defining success, I think that kind of think about it in two tracks. One is this operational element where we're working to improve where's my refund. So things like, are taxpayers getting the right answer the first time they call in? Can we reduce call time, average handle time? Can we improve agents' adherence to a quality assurance script or the accuracy of their of what they're sharing with the public? And then the second track is really this kind of like learning velocity. So how fast can we and how effectively can we go from a user research where we generate an insight into a hypothesis, testing something, spinning it up, and deploying it. And that's been really key to how we are able to move fast, both on delivering kind of the operational metrics and where we want to move the needle there, but also building capacity with people. So we're doing it with our colleagues and the Department of Revenue. So we're able to build up capacity and we're able to test out new things. In terms of the actual technology itself, there are about 3 different use cases that we're looking at, or capabilities, I would say. One is call summarization. So we're using Bedrock through AWS to build out a really basic markdown for call summarization. So we take a transcript. The Bedrock agent is able to summarize that into a really much more condensed summary. And it follows a formula that fits with a lot of the compliance needs that our taxation team has for the system of record. So we've been able to take kind of from early usability data, what is like a several minute long wrap up time in between each call, making it a matter of seconds. So it's still human in the loop. So we're not automating that full pipeline, but we are helping with the summarization, specifying the markdown structure, and then using Bedrock to handle a lot of that heavy lifting, so people can focus on what matters most, which is serving people and understanding their needs. The second thing we're working on is a knowledge base, and it's really about the employee experience and trying to improve the agent's ability to distill this like super complex tax policy and communicate it clearly to the public. And in the Amazon Web Services, the AWS Connect platform that is our contact center as a service platform, they have most of the stuff productized. One of the capabilities they have is called Agent Assist, where it's like, a kind of a side-by-side. AI is real-time listening to calls and then giving agents a brief little nudge saying, hey, I heard this, you might want to consider this next step or this follow-up, or you might want to say that. And we considered that at first, but from our user research, we found actually that that's not what agents wanted and that's not what agents needed. So while that was kind of baked into our software supply chain and was out of the box what we had available, that wasn't actually what people were asking for. So we decided, both because it wasn't in the user research and almost from a design and ethical perspective, that we didn't want to automate what was the highest value ad that agents have, which is understanding people's needs and providing that kind of compassionate service, right? So instead, we're piloting an on-demand rather than a kind of a real-time in the workspace and on-demand in a separate system, RAG-based, retrieval augmented generation-based knowledge base. And that way, if an agent has a question or they can't recall something or they want to check it, they're able to, at their own discretion, go and check that out, try to understand the policy a little bit better, figure out what that SOP, the standard operating procedure is, what they remembered it was. So instead of making it really about automating the best things that humans can do, we're trying to really just focus on that augmentation piece and giving agents a little bit of an assist. So the user research guided us away from what was out of the box and productized in our software supply chain towards something that was more effective. Finally, the last thing that we're working on right now, and we haven't quite finished it yet, is some skills-based routing, where we're using the customer journey maps, the employee journey maps, and a lot of the work that the New Jersey Innovation Authority has done in this space. We also talked to the Wisconsin Department of Revenue tech team and quite a few other states, including the state of Utah. We've been learning a lot from them about how we might be able to do skills-based routing and using the design artifacts that we have and the research that we've done up front to ensure that we're improving first call resolution. So when someone calls in, they get connected to the right person and they get their question answered the first time they call. So those are the three different use cases we're using, and I'm happy to dive into more details later. I will, Jake, I kind of lost track of time. How much time do I have left before I jump too far in?
Yeah, 1 or 2 more minutes would be fine.
Cool. So in terms of outcomes that we've seen from this, talked a lot about those 3 use cases, which are the, in the Where's My Refund framework that has been guiding all our work, the call summarization, the knowledge base, and then soon the skills-based routing. We've also been able to spin out 3 different experiments from this process, focusing on what people need, getting the right people together, having the funding to do it has allowed us to experiment. And we've really been pushing forward this idea of we shouldn't just have the opportunity to do so, we need to seize that opportunity, right? So we are working on a lightweight pipeline to improve the performance of our RAG systems, parsing PDFs. So we're not just like dumping static documents in there, but we can actually build out, more effective kind of data pipeline and machine learning operations pipeline. The second is we're doing a lot more of what Adrianna said around contextual evaluations. We started in Google Sheets, doing contextual evaluations or red teaming, and now we're automating that. Just trying to run some basic test suites and ensure that we're thinking about contextual evals or red teaming as the user acceptance testing of AI systems, right? You need UAT, right? That's exactly what this is, continue testing with users. And the final thing we're exploring right now is making a lot of our voice systems, the integrated voice recording, the IVR, other parts of our contact center speak to our website, right? So we're going to try to hook that up through an MCP server and make our data, which is already out there, much more useful, much more interoperable, and easier to digest for agents. So I'll pause there. That's kind of in summary, really how we're thinking about AI, both before we started working in it and what created the opportunity for us to do this work, and then some of the experiments that we're running, and we're going to continue testing, and would love to answer questions on that stuff as we all kind of learn together. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think there's so much there that we all can learn from. I think that's the way that you focus on starting from the problem, right? Like, what is the actual issue that we're trying to solve, rather than saying, here's this shiny new tool, let's go out and find all the places that we can implement it, is like really rooting deep in that problem. And with that, making sure that you're bringing along the folks who understand the problem the best and the folks who would be using this tool to solve it, right? Rather than just dropping something in their laps. And so hearing you talk about the way that you listened to them and then made changes, right, accordingly, I think is really important. I also love the way that you highlighted working with other states, because I think that there's so much that we all can learn from, obviously there's many different contexts, even at the same level of government, presumably, but so much commonalities of like things that we can learn from happening. So it's great to hear that that's all happening, those connections with other states and sharing lessons learned, and hopefully this can serve as a piece of that as well.
I'll add just those two things, the peer-to-peer learning and then the AI evaluations for reliability are the biggest accelerant for adopting responsible AI, right? We know where it's been done, we learn from other people, and we have some assurance that it's going to work as intended. That's what we've seen has worked for us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, well, I will move us to our third and final presentation. So we have Martin Skorczynski, who's with the Government Accountability Office. As I said, he's the Assistant Director for Emerging Technology, where he oversees a portfolio spanning artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity research, all the fun things. His current focus includes advancing GEO's generative AI capabilities, contributing to the agency's AI strategy, and assessing AI adoption maturity across the organization. He also co-facilitates the Legislative Branch CIO Council AI Working Group, where he supports coordination on shared standards, lessons learned on responsible AI adoption across other congressional support agencies. He's contributed to federal AI governance publications, including GAO's AI Accountability Framework, and has presented on AI implementation topics at international forums. At the Partnership for Public Service, we would especially highlight his participation in our AI Government Leadership Program, which he completed in spring of 2025, which I can't believe that's already almost a year ago. And so really appreciate you joining us today, Martin, and sharing your perspective. So I will hand it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Jake. And definitely it's great to be back as an alum of the Partnership for Public Service program. And I'll build on Adrianna's and Alexander presentations. I think there are trends are emerging over here. So I'm going to start. The hard part of AI in government is not the technology. And I'm not saying that because I'm a technologist who is working with a group of talented data scientists and technologists, but because of experience I had over the past several years. And something that Alexander said spoke to me. The hard part is the journey an idea takes to actually becomes a tool that staff can use. So before I describe the specific use case I prepared for today, I actually want to walk you through that life cycle, because while specific AI tools will vary depending on your agency's mission, the organizational journey is fairly universal. So what I want you to take away today isn't just a specific tool, but a framework for decision making, because the value is not what gets built, but what gets used. What I want to describe today is what I called governance by design, and where governance precedes and defines technology. And ultimately, it what makes the technology trustworthy enough to actually use. So to Alexander's point, it starts with how we listen and observe. At the GAO Innovation Lab, we built a deliberate system for capturing AI ideas directly from people doing the work. So we conduct structured user interviews and analyze workflow maps, the user journeys. And that process gave us inventory of more than 70 AI use cases. And now, that sounds like a lot, but not every AI becomes a use case, and not every use case becomes a tool. And that inventory turned out to be one of the most valuable governance tools we've built. Not because of what it told us to build, but what it allows us to see. And here's what I mean. When AI ideas arrive one at a time, you respond to them one at a time. You perhaps build for the loudest voice or the most urgent request. And before long, you have a collection of disconnected solutions that may reflect who had access to the innovation team, not necessarily where the greatest organizational need lives. So that's not an AI problem, that's a governance problem, and an inventory is the solution. So when you can see all those ideas at once, patterns emerge you simply cannot see any other way. So 5 teams might independently be describing the same underlying problem. And so solution built for one team may serve other teams with modest adaptation. So what looked like a technology question turns out to be organizational questions. And that visibility is what allows you to solve problems across the entire organization rather than in silos. So how do we prioritize? We have 2 conversations about every use case: value and feasibility. And the value conversation roughly asks about 3 things. Will this use case make our processes faster? Will it make the work better for the people doing it, freeing staff for work that actually requires human judgment, reducing burden on staff? And will it make our output more accurate and useful to people whom we serve? And the feasibility conversation is equally important. So that's it. Do we have the technical capability to do the use case? Do we have internal skills? Are there organizational conditions, the data governance, legal reviews, stakeholder alignment, cybersecurity reviews, and of course, financial sustainability? And not just to build the tools, but to maintain it over time. You might have noticed that the models are changing every 3 to 6 months. That requires you to actually go back and update your tool. So governance by design flips that around. The organizational conditions are upstream of the technology decisions, and you figure out those first, then you build. And you score use cases across value and feasibility, and you get something rare and genuinely useful, I think, a map. So you start with high value, high visibility, build those first. High value, hard to execute. Well, pursue, but with caution. Easy to build, but limited value. We sometimes call them low-hanging fruits. Those are useful for building confidence, but perhaps not the primary investment. They might be good for learning and sort of getting used to the technologies. And some, when scored, you'll find that they are simply not ready yet. And knowing that early saves you time, saves resources, and actually preserves the institutional credibility that gets spent every time an AI project may undeliver. So you have to be careful with that. So let me bring it actually to life, maybe through a project on congressional outreach. This use case is an early stage prototype. It's under development. And what it does, it optimizes GAO delivery of products and information to members of Congress based on their interest areas. So you might know that GAO is Congress's independent watchdog. We publish hundreds of rigorous, detailed, non-partisan reports every year. And the explicit purpose of everyone is to inform the decision of the members who need that information to do their job. Well, so if GAO report doesn't reach the right member at the right moment, it's a missed opportunity, not just for GAO, but for the oversight process it's designed to support. So we ran this through our framework, and on value, it scored very strongly. So you automate the routine, repetitive parts of preparing outreach, and that frees staff for the real human relationship building that no AI can or should replace. And on feasibility, we deemed that the technical capability was well matched to the problem. And here's where governance by design showed up in practice. So before you write a single line of code, you have to make a decision about accountability. So here the decision is that this tool would never directly communicate to Congress. That's only appropriate for our congressional relations professionals after reviewing, refining, and approving every communication that AI helps to prepare. So that's not a decision that we derived because of technical constraints. We arrived at it because we asked the governance question first: who should be accountable for what the system does? And the answer is very unambiguous. It's not an algorithm, it's not the model. So that decision shapes everything that comes after. What the system actually do? It detects signals of member interests, maybe press releases, hearing questions, piece of introduced legislation, then generates draft outreach template, connecting the members' own state priorities to the GA report most relevant to their work. So this is not a generic notification. The draft draws a direct line between what member has publicly stated and what GAO has already found or in the GAO body of knowledge. So the report doesn't have to be waiting to be discovered. So it's finding the right recipient at the right time. So the word draft, I was saying here, it does a lot of work in those sentences. And it reflects the explicit choice about where AI ends and human judgment begins. And what does AI do? Well, AI is really excellent at handling the scale and pattern recognition. And humans exercise the judgment, the deep institutional knowledge that we have, and the accountability. So this is not a technical limitation that we are working around. It's a governance decision. So the journey I described, from listening to staff, building structure, inventory, and applying a disciplined framework to a tool that changes how we serve Congress, is a journey of government organizations can take. Let me very briefly talk about who is involved in this decision making, because that's really important. The key partner of the lab in this project obviously is our customer, the Congressional Relations, but also the AI Council, who makes recommendations to the Executive Committee. And members of the AI Council include the CIO, CDO, chief scientists, and managing directors from across mission and operations teams. So the technology is not the hard part, and deciding before you build anything who is accountable for what the technology does, that's the hard part. And that is the part that makes the difference between AI that earns public trust and AI that erodes it. And in public service, this is not a compliance requirement. This is an obligation. Thank you, and I look forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Martin. I think that, yeah, there's so much that you shared there that is applicable across all sorts of different use cases. I especially love your conversation around, right, governance by design. You know, I think a lot of times people can look at governance and see it as something that may slow down a process, when in actuality, when governance is used to build trust, that's what speeds it up, whether it's adoption by internal stakeholders, whether it's, you know, acceptance by external stakeholders. So really appreciate that. And especially that view of accountability, right? Who is going to be accountable for this? Well, wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and we'll kind of bring back our full panel here. I will kick us off by doing some by doing some I have some questions that I'll put before the group. And then what I'll do is open it up to Q&A from the full audience. So as a reminder, we'll be using the Q&A feature here in Zoom. So if you have a question, please click on that Q&A box, type in your question, and we will take a look at it and put it before the panel. But I will go ahead and get us started with a question. So let's start with, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned as you've seen AI solutions implemented in government? Obviously, I think you've all shared great little kind of pieces, but if you could distill it down to kind of like one lesson that you would want to leave our audience with, what would that be? And I will pass it over to Adrianna first, if that's all right.
It's that AI is just one tool in a toolbox full of many possible tools, and that just like 10, 12 years ago, we were having webinars like this about should states and cities have digital teams. We're now having these conversations about AI. Different people are going to adopt these tools at different pace, but fundamentally, I think, like Martin said, it comes down to the people internally that you're working with, as well as the people that you're serving. So is this the right problem? And is this the right tool? How do you evaluate it? How do you build leadership and skills in your team to even start to address it? I would say that that's what my key takeaway has been when thinking about AI in public service. And maybe in 10 years, there'll be a completely new technology that we think will also change the world. It's undeniable there are many benefits, but like Martin said, the trust with the public is essential. We cannot erode that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that emphasis on, right, like what is AI good at, right? What is this tool actually good for, rather than just trying to apply it in all cases, right? It is just one of those tools. Alexander or Martin, anything you'd like to add or jump in?
Sure.
Go ahead, Martin.
Governance is the full set of decisions organization has to make about how it operates right now in an environment that is changing faster than its existing structures were designed to handle. So that's one thing. And that's where the tension is. Government is built for stability inherently. Our processes, approval chains, policy framework, they are designed to be deliberate, careful, and consistent. And those are all the virtues. And they do reflect real values about accountability and public trust. AI is moving at a pace that those structures were never designed for. And here, the lesson is, I think, you cannot govern AI with a static framework. You need a governance structure that is itself designed to change. I also think in terms of continuous architecture, and it's more than a concept. It's a practice. Treating the decisions you make about how you build your AI systems not as a thing that is established once, but as a thing that you continuously reassess. Having regular review cycles of your governance models, and also monitoring the legal and policy landscape, the way security teams are doing monitoring threat landscape systematically, but not reactively. And I think the underlying all of this is capability to look ahead systematically. So that's not about predicting the future, but scanning the technology horizon deliberately and identifying early signals where technology, policy, public expectations are heading ahead of time. So I guess this is the lesson. Governance by design, it's a not one-time decision. It's a continuous discipline built for change, not just for today.
Wonderful. Yeah, definitely. It's the flexibility that is required, I think, especially with AI. Alexander, anything you'd like to add? All right. I'd like to turn us to a question around leadership. We at the Partnership for Public Service think a lot about leadership and developing leaders in the public sector at all levels. When it comes to the implementation of AI solutions, what role did leadership play, right, in kind of the specific use cases you were talking about, or in general, what kind of leadership is required in this space moving forward? And whoever would like to jump in, go for it. Martin, over to you.
No, I was just thinking about the leadership, and there's this concept of cascading leadership. So first of all, we did have executive leadership, but I want to go beyond that statement. And the cascading leadership, the idea that commitment cannot live just on the top, it has to flow through every level. So senior leaders, yes, they do set the vision, but just as important, they also remove the institutional barriers that can otherwise hamper or stop the initiative even before it starts. So I'm talking about like policy constraints, hiring challenges, procurement timelines or issues, data governance questions. So that's a problem that a project team cannot solve on its own. But senior leadership alone is not enough. That commitment has to cascade down, and middle managers need the tools, the context, and the mandate actually to champion the AI work on their teams. So you need the support from individuals at various levels who understand what you are building, then believe in it, and are willing to actually earn their way through the skepticism of their peers. And that's a hard part. And I think there are like three characteristics. We can expand more, but it's like leaders who understand enough of AI to ask the right questions. So you don't need to be a technologist, but you need to understand AI well enough to interrogate the work. Leaders who build trust deliberately, and we talked about that. And leaders who measure mission impact, not just deployment activity. So it's tempting to measure what's easy, outputs, deployments, features delivered, but deploying a tool is not the same as improving a mission outcome. So I think it's an organizational change role as well. And those are the things that I've been just thinking about recently about leadership and the success of AI initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. I think especially, as part of our AI government leadership program, one of the things we talk about, I would say the majority of the people who go through that program don't come from technical backgrounds, right? They come from legal, procurement, HR, what have you. And so this idea that AI is not just, oh, the tech team handles that, right? That's their job over there. It's like it involves everyone across the organization coming together with their own expertise, and having some basic form of AI literacy is critical for all leaders. And so I appreciate you highlighting that. Adrianna.
I have two thoughts, one on the C level and one on the ground level staff, right? So on the C level, my thoughts are that is the existing structure in most agencies with CISOs and CIOs sufficient to govern AI and oversee this? Potentially, we're thinking about there's now CIOs, there are now CDAOs. Like, what do these jobs even mean? Like, we should maybe have a conversation with folks who have these job titles and understand how different all of their jobs are as well. And then also chief digital services officers, and then how do these folks work together? How do you foster more cooperation at this level so that they're making these decisions according to a strategic goal that should hopefully center the people and not just the technology? And so, if so, what are the skill sets that these C-level folks need to learn in order to be able to manage a workforce that is now increasingly expected to use these technologies? And related to that, there is a question around accountability. At a legislative level, you have, for example, in California, there's legislation that says for AI companies, you can no longer say that the AI did it, and to claim like autonomous, like I didn't do it, the thing did. But in our internal organization, it's like, how do we think about accountability? Like if you launch chatbot and it says some really bad things, like, is it the fault of the person who was made to deploy the chatbot, or is it the team, or is it their leader? I feel like we're going to see more public examples of things like this that will maybe help us shape that. But maybe before the bad things happen, we should have thoughts about this as well. Like, where does the buck stop, especially if the leadership is encouraging people to use these tools? And I actually had their point, which was that my hot take is that I think teams with very well-developed digital practices, like Alexander's and my old team, are probably in a good shape to have product managers really enhance, especially in a time of leaner budgets, enhance their capabilities with regards to prototyping And this is really important, but it's also important to establish a form of, this is not just vibe coding to sell a thing to OpenAI, but this is a vibe coding because we don't have resources and we need to prove a concept in order to get buy-in from leadership to get resources for something else. And that seems perfectly fine and acceptable, because the alternative is, I just can't do this thing. So if that's the case, then how do we get groups of people who have had experience in the last 15 years in building software in practice at cities, states, and federal, to come together, maybe even work with some private sector organizations. For example, I think Propel is doing really good work with teaching leaders at a state level how to build practices to improve access to SNAP, right? So again, even in these engagements, it's not just about buy a vendor tool, but it's about, there's a specific goal, which is help people get SNAP benefits. And there's like a, can we do this? We can do training, we can provide resources, we can buy something. But ultimately, I think, again, no matter if it's AI or Airtable or automation, like we're in this job with technology and government, we're still just fundamentally just serving the people.
Absolutely. Alexander, anything you'd like to add on the leadership question?
I love all the threads, and there's so many different places I want to go. I just, on the accountability side, there's a really great framework that NIST put out in the last week, thinking about the impact that AI agents will have as economic agents, right? And how do we attribute and measure that appropriately? We need to start thinking about these questions, both in our economy and also inside organizations. The prototyping piece, Adrianna, I think is awesome. And we're hopefully going to do more and see more of that. On the leadership part, Jake, I think that leadership also in measurement. So thinking about the Propel team, Dave Guarino, what they're doing, working out in the open. I think that working out in the open is so important. And we have so many more tools to do that today, right? So leadership really does look like sharing, the tools, the capabilities, the practices, so that everyone can participate. We know that a lot of the frontier labs right now don't have the structural incentives to serve the public sector in a way that we need, right? And aren't really thinking about safety and governance and durable socioeconomic outcomes like we know we need, right? So in that case, working in the open, focusing on measurement, and trying to lead in that space is I think, one of the best kind of levers and opportunities we have to inform the trajectory of this technology and where development goes. So I love what that team is doing, and we've learned a lot from them and continue to do so.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, we're quickly running out of time, and I could ask questions all day. I'd love to turn to some of the questions that we have coming in from the audience. The first one from Jiahao Chen is, creating an AI inventory is itself a huge governance task across finance, procurement, legal, and IT project teams. And there's gray use of apps on personal phones like ChatGPT. So what is the panel's recommendations on how to plan, resource, and execute inventorying efforts? I will also add every app that's is used now has embedded AI in it, and how do you account for that in these inventories is a question I will tack onto this one as well. So Martin, I know you mentioned the role of AI inventories. Would love to have you kick us off on this one.
Yeah, so I look at that as it's an excellent question, and we've been thinking about it, and my colleague in the Innovation Lab is working on something that we've been talking about. There are commercial offerings under, if you Google, idea management platform. So you can actually capture those ideas. But what it does, it's more than capturing the inventory. It engages the staff from across the agency. So you actually getting engagement. And if you think about it, if you make it public as well, or something that, think about Reddit. So people can upvote, downvote, comment. Suddenly you have a community of people who are talking about AI. And suddenly you are actually learning about maybe process problems. Because they will ask, can this chatbot do my calendar for me? Well, maybe. We don't know. but that creates engagement, and it gives you actually insight in what people across your organization are thinking and where the pain points, when there are the tensions. So there are commercial tools. Yes, it's an undertaking, it's an effort, it's a task, but it creates this engagement and visibility into the pain points. So I highly recommend having a platform that actually cuts across the, you mentioned here, procurement, IT, legal. We are planning, if we have the resources, to start working on that internal at GAO. This is something that we've been talking about, but it's more from the perspective of user engagement. And I think Alexandra was talking about, sort of how you design from the customer-centric point of view. Thank you.
Well, Alexander or Adrianna, anything to add on AI inventories?
We know in cybersecurity that effective design and secure by design works. So let's make it the same way, right? If people want to get a job done, let's provide them with the tools in an effective way, in a secure way, so that they can get the job done and they don't feel forced to go to their personal environments, to other environments, to unsecure environments to serve the public and serve their mission.
Perfect. Adrianna, anything before I move us forward? All right. I'm going to grab one more question from the Q&A, and we don't have a lot of time, so we could maybe just do a lightning round, as it were, of a kind of quick responses. But this one, we talked about the leadership level, but we have an anonymous question that says, government is infamous for working in silos. Each of your use cases necessarily required active engagement of stakeholders across agency divisions and expertise. How comfortable were your stakeholders with working together, and what specific parts of the R&D process contributed to cohesion among them? So the idea of kind of all the different stakeholders that you have to bring together. So yeah, maybe a lesson that you learned from that, or kind of what your experience was with bringing those groups together for these use cases.
I would say that whether you're building software and trying to do that in a cross-functional way, or trying to red team, or trying to do an experiment, having clear executive leadership as well as clear project goals is definitely the basics that you have to start with. Making people feel included. I think sometimes that's a thing that folks forget. If you are part of a team in a government agency that gets to work with really fun technologies, there's potentially the angle of other people who work with you or in other agencies feeling left out, or feeling you think you're better than us, or so you really want to get around those types of mindsets by spelling out very clearly why this is important and what everyone's role in that is.
Perfect. Well, we are right here at time. I know some of our panelists have to jump for other things, for the busy work that they're doing. So just want to really thank all of you for that. Before the audience leaves, though, what I would love, we're going to put a very short survey in the chat. I promise. It's 2 questions. It's very quick. Thank you to Sam for dropping that in. It's really helpful for us at the AI Center to get a sense of how helpful these events are. There's an optional 3rd question if you want to give specific feedback or ideas for future events. But again, just those first 2 questions was all we really need there. So again, thank you so much to our panelists for their work. Please stay in touch with us here at the AI Center for future events. And we look forward to continuing this conversation in other formats in the future. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.